welcome back. We're here this morning with a couple zero turns that are kind of having the same issue. I have done a couple videos on mower stalling after 15 to 30 minutes and troubleshooting and things like that on them and showing you what some of those simpler things are, but I've never actually done that real time and shown you the process I go through. I'm going to do that today. Please, first off, like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. This is a Briggs Stratton Professional Series 724cc, 25 horsepower engine. This engine's a pretty stout engine. They are not without their issues. Definitely have some. This thing will run from anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes before it starts cutting out, and it'll die. It'll stall out on them. First thing I like to do on a V-twin is check that each cylinder is independently firing. Each cylinder can work by itself, although it'll be under less power. You can unplug one of the cylinder wires and ground it out, or you can put a spark plug in it and just kind of lay it against the side. It will spark when that happens, but when you turn it over, if we've got this one unplugged, we will know that the opposite side is working if it fires up. You can visually inspect the spark. Also, when you have it laying up against the side, you should see spark between the middle and the outside edge. Very easy way to test the spark on each side and test the cylinders independently. We usually use a spark checker to check the spark if one side or the other is not firing. Now, if you get spark on both sides, but one side is still not firing, you'll want to take off the valve cover and inspect the valves. We're going to check this other side here. Got it unplugged. We know both sides are firing. We know that we have full power out of it. This issue normally isn't a problem of one side firing or the other, but it's always good to start with that because on these it's a very common issue. If we go towards a bunch of other things and then we find out that the spark plug or that one of the valves or something had or one of the sides had a bent push rod or something like that, we're just kind of wasting our time going further down the line. This sounds like, though, something that is either a fuel related or a carburetor related issue, maybe a vapor lock, something like that. This does have a carbon canister on it. I will show you here shortly. We're going to test this and figure out where we're losing it at. Now, last time I tested it, I'll let it run here for a little bit. What I got is after I ran it for a little bit, I wasn't getting any flow from the fuel pump. It seemed like it was either vapor locking or something like that. If that happens, you can always crack the top of the fuel cap and see if that helps. See if it'll start to continue to run at that point. If that's the case, you know that the vent is likely clogged or the carbon canister has an issue. There's just an EPA kind of a vent that comes up out of the top. I'll show you that when we have this all open. At this point, I'm not sure exactly which one it is, but we know this side is firing, so it's getting pulse to the fuel line. Should be a good pulse. They've never had issues with it before. We'll run this for a little bit and see if we can't get this to happen. Sitting here running it and running it under a load are two completely different things. I may be able to sit here and run it for an hour, hour and a half, who knows. The pulse line here is a little bit cracked. I'm not really too worried about that. That's the line that actually gives the fuel pump its signal. It doesn't really take much to give the fuel pump a good pulse. I'm thinking it's not the fuel pump at this point. There's one easy way that I like to test it. I'll take the fuel line off of the incoming side of the fuel pump, and then I will pressurize the tank with some compressed air. Now, you don't want to super pressurize it. You can blow out a seam or anything else, but you just want to give it a little bit of pressure to see if you can get that fuel to flow into your container like you want it to. So I'll take that fuel line. I'm just going to put it here. So that's going through the fuel filter and everything else in order to get to there. See, with as much pressure as I just put in that tank, that should have just been shooting out of there. That tells me straight off that there's some sort of restriction in that tank. This is kind of a hard one to diagnose sometimes because it's intermittent. You know, people think that they're heating up and they're shutting off or something like that when this happens. You know, that it's a coil issue or something like that. Well, it could be. You can check your spark after it heats up and see if that's the case. But if you're pressurizing your fuel tank up top and you're getting only that little tiny bit out of there, something is restricting it. Whether it's the fuel line or whether it's... I mean, I got good pressure in that thing, and it should just be shooting out of there. Also, the fuel pump, it should just be spraying out of there, and it's not. It's just barely trickling. That's not right. Could the fuel pump be bad, or there be a rip or tear in this? Like I had mentioned, yes, it definitely could. Check those things also. We're going to work our way up and see exactly where this fuel line is having issues at, or where the restriction is. Pull the fuel line out of all the retainers and everything, and we'll check it. If you look down in and you see any cracking or anything around the fuel line, you will want to address that. Normally you'll just want to replace it. The fuel line could be sucking in on itself if it's separating. It could also be the fuel filter. If it's plugged up, it'll cause this same issue. Looks relatively new. I just blew through this. It's extremely clear. There's no clogs or anything in it. I don't see anything looking down in that would tell me that there's anything wrong with this fuel line, except that it's cut at a horrible angle. Other than that, it looks pretty good. Let's try this test again. There is a flow, but again, with that much pressure in it, it should just be pumping straight out of there. Something's restricting it further up. To do this, we're gonna have to take the actual cover and everything off. Looks like it's, I believe, a 1/2 inch under here. Just a bolt holding it on, and then maybe a T up front to get this plastic off. I'll spare you the video on that part of it. Now that we've got all that off, boy, that sure was a pain. Get right down to what we're looking at. I already had this all now that we've got this all off, we can see everything down here. So we can see what we're doing. This fuel line seems kind of fat right here, almost like it's swelled up. We're gonna take it off. And this EPA line going to the carbon canister that is right down behind, I'll show you that a little bit closer here in a minute. It's just kind of deteriorated. That's just a vent though. and we bypassed that by opening this when we were having the issues with it shutting down. That didn't help anything. And we saw how the fuel showed restricted. That's about clear as can be as I blow through it. These are kind of hard to get out without breaking. Sometimes they get so brittle. Try to get under the collar of it. Just kind of pry side to side. Many times what'll happen is this will be cracked, your pickup tube. There's a crack anywhere in this, it will not pick up properly. It won't have suction wherever that is. I don't see any cracks really in this one. Many times what'll also happen is this is a pretty big chamber and an area for debris and stuff to hide in. If anything gets up in here, it stops right at this corner, and that's what will restrict your fuel flow. That, or there could be a bunch of stuff in the bottom of the tank or something. Let's blow through it. Look at that. Now talk about a fuel restriction, right? That's insane. Glad that I did that. I've never had one actually on tape, but there was one that I showed that I kind of blew out in the cup holder that was similar. I mean, it didn't have quite this much in it though. That's a lot. Fuel line was okay, everything else is okay. The problem is grass and dirt and debris and everything is getting down into the tank, and it's getting caught at the elbow. If you're having a fuel restriction or a shut-off issue after 15 to 45 minutes, it really depends. Sometimes it'll be able to keep up, you know. Some of that stuff probably falls back down in the tank after a minute. God knows what. We're gonna get this tank completely cleaned out. We'll replace this EPA line, and we'll be all set and ready to rock for them. As I'm replacing the bushing, I just wanted to get kind of a closer up view of all that stuff. Looks like bugs, dirt, debris, leaves. Obviously we're replacing the bushing and the fuel lines and everything while we're right here. Might as well, with as hard as this all was to get off. Well, we saw what happens when debris gets into the elbow like that, right? This one here I tried to get to yesterday and finish up the video. Didn't have a chance just because of how busy we are. I think this one could have the same issue. I ran this thing for an hour and a half outside. He said it kept cutting out after 20 minutes or so. I don't have a whole lot of place to mow around here. Let it run for an hour and a half though. Never wavered once. No issue whatsoever. We're going to check this out and see if it's having that same issue or figure out exactly what's going on. First on this, I want to take a look at the fuel flow, see if it's anything like the other one. I'll take the fuel line off at the carburetor. Just run it back into the jar. Maybe. seems like a pretty good flow. Maybe not full. Kind of hard to tell sometimes. Seemed like it should be enough fuel to run this thing and keep it running. Obviously was for an hour and a half. Fuel looks great too. Your fuel line could be plugged anywhere. Check it. You can check the fuel filter, make sure it's new or at least cleaned out. And then we come to yet another elbow. Let's see what this one looks like. Fuel line kind of almost looks fat there. It just really doesn't want to. I'm just going to go ahead and ruin the, well, it's good fuel line, it seems like. I don't want to break that plastic nipple, so I'm just going to cut this fuel line so that doesn't happen. Pull it off. Fuel line doesn't really look necessarily bad. And there it is. Bunch of stuff at the elbow. And all that does is eventually slow down the flow enough or restrict the flow enough that you don't get enough fuel to keep it running. It essentially ends up running out of gas. As I'm sitting here, there's more falling out. Definitely the #1 reason mowers die out after they've been running for a while. And again, many times people think that it's because they're overheating. Well, in this case, they're not. See if you're losing spark or whether you're losing fuel. You know, if it starts to die out and you can spray some starting fluid or give it choke and keep it running for longer, you know that the issue is fuel related. You're not getting enough fuel. In this case, you're not getting enough fuel because all of the junk down in the tank was restricting that elbow. I'm not sure exactly what all those things are. Seems like kind of an assortment of, I don't know. Whatever gets down in that tank will find its way up in there eventually. And it's funny that that's what filters stuff out as it's coming up. But it goes from a large cavity down to a small piece. It almost looks like maybe I crushed that nipple. I'm probably going to need to get a new one because that could restrict it a little also. Don't need any more restriction than it already has with something like this. That just goes to show you sometimes with small engine stuff, even though everything's testing good, you know, you could have went through it. You're testing your spark. You can test the compression on both sides. You know, make sure both cylinders are working. You're getting good fuel flow, right? That seemed like a good fuel flow. So then people run into thinking, hey, it's you know, it's an overheat issue. The coils are out. You know, they keep going out. Replace the coils. You know, you chase it and chase it and chase it, and then you realize it's something as simple as this. This is one of the most common issues I see where there's reoccurring issues. And both of these, I'm glad that they actually ended up having stuff in the elbow because, well, wouldn't have made a very good video otherwise, right? Just kind of a sneaky suspicion I had on both of these. Kind of something where nothing else made sense except for a restricted fuel flow. Hopefully this helps someone out, save you some money, solve your issue. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe.